Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. My guest today is Anthony Neves. Now, I got to know Anthony because he was connected to me by Mitch Matthews, who runs an amazing podcast. He was on the podcast, I was on the podcast, and Mitch was like, you guys should know each other. So I'm going to get to know Antonio at the same time you're going to get to know Antonio today. Antonio is an author of 4 books, including Stop Living on Autopilot, Take Responsibility for Your Life, and Rediscover a Bolder, Happier You. On his podcast, The Best Thing, Antonio talks with leaders about the best thing to happen to them that would never appear on a resume. Now, that's kind of cool, and I'm excited to ask him that question back. His speaking audiences over the years have included Google, Amazon, Starwood Hotels and Resorts Worldwide, the American Society of Health Systems Pharmaceuticals, Booking.com, Credit Union, National Association, Stanford University, and scores more. He's been a correspondent in New York City with top television producers, including NBC, PBS, BET networks, and we are going to learn all about him, his background, Michigan University, Columbia. Antonio, are you a Michigan boy by heart? Are you a Michigan boy by birth? Why are you Western Michigan?
Oh, listen, I'm born and raised in Michigan. Though I live in Southern California now. Michigan is where my heart is. I'm so happy that I was born and raised there. You know, if you're from Michigan, you got to put the hand up and people say, where are you from? I'm from right here, right smack dab in the middle of the state. And let me tell you, one of the best gifts I ever had was being raised there.
Yeah. So are you, do you cheer for Michigan sports? Have you always been a Michigan sports person? And I ask you that because I'm married a Cincinnati guy. So, you know, Ohio, Michigan, not always the best of friends.
Yeah, we don't like the state of Ohio too much. Don't get me wrong. Good people there. I like Cincinnati. I like Procter and Gamble, and I like the place. But I root for the Michigan Wolverines, even though for undergrad, I went to Western Michigan University. But, you know, there's something about, you know, the middle of the country, that blue collar work ethic, the change of seasons. It just instills something in you that though I live in Southern California now, and our kids just went to the mountains recently. We got them some snow and they're like, what is this? They think every day is 72 degrees and sunny. And I know you were raised in Miami, so you know what that's all about. But yeah, Michigan is my heart.
Yeah, I was raised in Miami, and I used to think that I thought winter was the time of year between when they put the fake snow in the mall and when they took the fake snow out of the mall. And so when I moved to Washington, D.C., and then New Haven, Connecticut, and now Boston, I was like, what are you talking about? Winter lasts 6 months? Wait a minute. I didn't sign up for that.
You didn't sign up for that. And the thing about living in warm climate places like Southern California, like in Miami, is that there's not really that aggressive change of seasons. And I'm a firm believer that the change of seasons are extremely therapeutic. I think sometimes I am emotionally constipated because I haven't gone through what the seasons provide you with. There are probably times I have anger, I have sadness, and I need to cry, or I need to eat a pot roast all by myself. But I look outside and it's sunny and it's green. Yeah. I'm like, I should drink a green juice. I have to go outside. It's too nice.
Yeah, well, in Boston, where we all hate ourselves for 6 months out of the year, there's plenty of pot roast. In fact, I actually said to my husband just the other day, I was able to get my first vaccine last week, and I was driving to pick up my kids from school, and I saw this one daffodil on the side of the road. Like there was a whole bunch of like little buds coming up, but there was this one that was like 6 inches, 8 inches taller than the rest. And it was like, hello, here I am. It's spring. And it was like, I'd had my vaccine. It was warm enough that I wasn't wearing a jacket because, you know, like when you live in the cold, the day that it's over 40, you put the jacket on and you don't take it back out, no matter whether it's 41 or 42. You're like, It's springtime now. So I'm not wearing, I think I might even be wearing cutoff shorts, actually, because I'm aggressive about springtime coming. And I was like, daffodils, vaccines, warm weather. It was actually opening day for the Red Sox. And I was like, it's spring, but you don't get that. And I'm sort of wondering, as you think about, you know, what makes a great life, and we all have these seasons of, you know, work and rest and, you know, harvest and planting and getting excited for the next time. How do you do that in a warm climate where you don't have, where it's like every day is the same, 72 and sunny, every day is Thursday? What's that like?
It's a few things. I think first and foremost, it's all about standards. It's all about values. You know, of course, our emotions, those are going to ebb and flow. Those are going to come and go. Sadness, anger, fear, you're happy, you're excited, etc. But I'm a firm believer that how we show up on a regular Tuesday when not much happens, when it's not your birthday, when you're not getting married, when you're not closing on a house, when you don't win an award, determines the rest of our life. You know, it's kind of like the work that you're willing to do when no one is watching. A funny story, yesterday, you know, I was on the Today Show talking about my book. I know you've been on the Today Show before, and that was pretty amazing. It was fantastic. I loved it. But that is a pretty rare day overall in the grand scheme of my life. I had to get back to my 5-year-old twins, my coaching clients, my business, my speaking, etc. So again, I'm a firm believer that how we show up on the days when no one is watching will determine our success or failure in life. Not to be corny motivational speaker, you're an athlete. I was a collegiate athlete myself. I think there's something so magical about the Olympics, and say a sport like the 100-meter dash. For men, that races over in less than 10 seconds. For women, less than 11 seconds. But people train for 4 years for that moment when no one's in the stands, when no one is watching. So I like to ask people, are they willing to do the work when no one is watching? And I think when you're willing to do that, when you have standards, you have values, exceptional things can happen.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I actually was just reading a couple days ago that Usain Bolt has run something like a total of 173 seconds in all of the Olympics, right? Or like some ridiculous thing like that. Like he's spent 20 years training for 173 seconds. That's less than 3 minutes.
Wow. Well, yeah, in football, the average football play, even though, you know, a football game lasts forever, the average football play is 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of friends that work in the sports world, and they're teaching athletes, yo, just go show up for those 6 seconds. Just focus on the next 6 seconds, which is exceptional when it comes to mindset. Wow, 173 seconds, Usain Bolt. That's amazing. That has me like my mind blown right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, don't quote me on that, because I've been doing a ton of research going into my next book, and it was one of those things that I was like, I saw that written on someone's blog, and I'm like, I got to fact check that, because that's fascinating. So this idea of just showing up for the next 6 seconds, right? Or just showing up for that race. Like thank you for calling me an athlete. It's funny. I ran my first mile of my life when I turned 39. So this whole idea of being an athlete, I think, is hilarious. Even though I'm a competitive rower now, every time the coach brings the launch up to the boat and he's like, hello, athletes, here's what we're going to do next. I'm like,
well, hold on. You're not just a competitive rower. If I'm correct, aren't you like ranked in the world or something like that?
Well, I am the reigning lightweight 40 to 49-year-old world indoor champion for the 2K, which is hilarious.
That's awesome.
Hilarious.
That's incredible.
But again, you spend months and months and months, and that whole thing is like less than 8 minutes. And, you know, if you're like a Olympic male, it's like less than 5.5 minutes, right? It takes a 40 to 49-year-old lightweight's a lot longer than like the 200-pound, you know, Olympians. But this idea of staying in the game, staying in it, right? Because you're at that point and things hurt. It's uncomfortable. You want to stop. And I remember seeing Muhammad Ali said something like, you're already in pain, right? It already hurts. Would you rather be in pain and hurt as a champion, or would you rather be in pain and hurt as a loser? I mean, those weren't his exact words. He said it much more poetically than that. So how do we not go into autopilot in these moments when we're just like exhausted from whether it's the sport or just the pandemic or life all around us, routine? How do we stay present for everything?
I'm a firm believer that breakthroughs come in small steps. Like, people always have to say you have to make that big leap, you have to make that big jump. But I'm a firm believer that breakthroughs come with consistent, disciplined, small steps. So I'm a firm believer in this day and age when everybody seems to be doing everything, I'm actually inviting people to do less. I love the quote, and I'm paraphrasing from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And he says something to the extent of, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. If you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. So in many ways, I like to think about life like a computer operating system. And I ask people, like, you know, how many apps do you have open in your life? And as you know, if you have a lot of apps open and everything running at the same time, what happens? Your processor speed slows down. Yeah. Worst case scenario, it can lead to a crash. And let's be clear, I've had plenty of crashes over the course of my life. So I invite people to do less. And I invite people to make a decision today. Not 5 decisions, not 10 decisions. Like, what is the one thing that when you go to bed tonight, if it happens, you will consider the day a success? I think if you ask yourself that question at the top of the day, it's going to make your day go that much better. If you say, what are the 3 things that must happen this week for me to call this week a success? And you can write those things down. It changes everything. And the reason why it changes everything is because when you determine what's most important about today, this week, when all of a sudden those emails start coming in, those social media notifications start coming in, different things trying to grab your attention, you can cross-reference those with, does this align with what my priorities are for today? A lot of people, listen, I get caught up in this as well. We live life like our inbox is our to-do list, like our email. Your inbox is not your to-do list. That's what they want from you. That's what she wants, what he wants from you. The question begs, what do you want out of today? And I just think enough people don't ask themselves the question, what's most important about today, this week, this month, this quarter, you name it.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Your inbox is everyone else's to-do list, for sure. And you can either decide to be the catcher's mitt or you could be the pitcher, right?
Ooh, I like that.
It's really one or the other. There's not much, what's in between the catcher and the pitcher? Getting hit in the head with the baseball, right? You got to make a decision. So let's talk about some of those times where everything came crashing down. What does that look like in the life of a high performer, a collegiate athlete, somebody who teaches people how to make the most of their lives?
Yeah,
what does that look like?
I'll give you a couple examples. And I worked in talent prior to doing my work as a leadership and development speaker, coach, author, you name it. I spent 12 years in New York City as a reporter, correspondent, television host, producer, you name it.
Real low stress job.
Low stress job. I mean, come on.
Easy peasy, mail it in.
But I had something crazy happen to me. My big break in New York City. I'm the guy that arrived in New York City with less than $1,000 in his bank account, with dreams of working in the television industry. And 2 years, about 2.5 years later, I'd made it, quote unquote, made it air quotes. I was on live TV every single day with Nickelodeon, where I was the co-host of a live television show. I mean, kids could tune in every single day, millions of people, and watch me co-host this show and interact with different stars, celebrities of the day. And I thought I had it made. But after 2 years of being on that show, I got fired. They basically told me like, hey, the show's going in a different direction and we're not going to renew your contract. So when they say we're not going to renew your contract, that means that you are fired. And the truth.
Now, did you see that coming? Did you have any idea, or did it catch you by surprise?
Hindsight being 2020, 100%. But in the moment, in the youth, with a big ego in my head, no, I didn't know what was coming. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was making what I thought was, good money at the time. People knew me. I was giving out autographs, all these things, but I was taking it for granted. What we talked about earlier, being willing to do the work when no one was watching, I was not doing that. I was not improving. I was getting distracted. They implored me to get better, to look at my reels, to look at the tape so I could become better at my craft. But I didn't. So I got fired, and that sent me in a big tailspin. And I remember I had long dreadlocks at the time. And I remember, the cliche moment in the mirror, cutting those off one by one while I was crying. And I ended up moving to Los Angeles, where I thought I was going to be the hot stuff there, because I came off of a few years being on this Nickelodeon show, and it seemed like no one cared. I believed at that moment, Laura, that the best thing to ever happen to me was behind me and not ahead of me. And it put me in a tailspin of smoking a lot of marijuana, so not to feel, drinking way too much beer, eating unhealthy, until, I kind of realized I had to make a decision how I was going to show up in this life and get things back in order. But that was an extremely depressing period, again, because I thought the best thing to happen to me was behind me. But as I've learned over the course of my life, that wasn't the case. And we can start anew, make new commitments, et cetera. But I learned a lot from that.
Now, you couldn't have been that old at the time, right? Because Nickelodeon doesn't have old people like me as hosts. So you graduate from college, you're an athlete, you come to New York, you've gotten your master's degree at this point?
No, not funny enough.
So this is even before the master's degree. So you're in your early 20s?
I was in my mid-20s.
Mid-20s. So you sort of maybe have a frontal lobe fully formed, but not entirely, probably, right? This is yeah. So and you come off of, I would imagine, being in a fairly regimented lifestyle where, as an athlete, you have to show up to practice, you have to eat a certain way, you have to do a certain thing. And then all of a sudden, how did you create the structure in your life I think it's hard. I'm not being very articulate about this, but as I'm thinking about it, I think that, I think it is difficult to figure out our shape when we don't have a structure around us to bounce off of and to feel the edges. So how did you crawl back out of that or figure out who you were in that point when you in your brain is still forming at that point?
Yeah, well, again, I was in my mid to late 20s or something like that, but I had to give myself structure right. I was an athlete, so I was used to an aggressive schedule. Television equally, we knew what time the show was going to go live every single day. Then all of a sudden, that was gone, and
right.
I was unemployed and watching my bank account empty and didn't have any structure. And that's where I think I found myself going into some bad habits. Again, smoking the weed, the drinking, hanging out, partying a little bit too much. But even in the back of my mind, I was fortunate enough that I was an athlete, and I knew that structure was going to be my friend. So something that I knew, even though I didn't want to admit it at the time, I wanted to wallow in pity, was that having something on the calendar is important.
Yes.
And I say that to everyone these days, having something on the calendar every single day to look forward to for the week, et cetera, is so critical. So slowly but surely, I started putting things on my calendar there in California. Those are writing meetings with fellow writers out there in LA, which are easy to find. Those were improv classes. Those were acting classes. Those were volunteering opportunities. I found myself at the library pretty much on a daily basis, just where I knew if I was at the library from 10 to 12, something good would happen from reading a book or watching a DVD there or something like that. So what I had to do was institute structure on my own. And as I instituted structure, that kind of got me out of that depression, that sadness. I met new people, started doing new creative endeavors. Before you know it, landed an agent. Then, started booking television commercials, Mazda Zoom things. Started creating a community. That was big as well. In my experience, I'm sure you will agree that no one who has accomplished anything of significance did it alone. Neither should you. And I was isolating at the time. And then, after a couple of years in LA, I decided to pivot, that I wanted to tell stories that really, really matter. And that's how I ended up finding my way back to New York City for graduate school. But the short answer is creating structure and an intentional community to surround yourself with.
The other thing I like about what you did is you set it up in a way where a lot of people will say, like, well, just go on one interview, just go on a couple interviews, just start small. But you didn't do that. You started with bettering yourself. You put yourself in situations where you were not going to get rejected, right? There isn't rejection at the library, right? There isn't rejection when you're sitting down just having a writing meeting with other people. You're not putting yourself out there to be judged. So you sort of found yourself in yourself before letting other people, like you gave yourself structure and definition before letting other people do that for you, which is sort of the same as demanding that you control your calendar and your to-do list rather than your inbox doing it.
Yeah, we're waiting for a lot of other people to make decisions for us. And I'm a firm believer that not making a decision is making a decision. For me, accountability is critical. I think I'm really fortunate to have been an athlete, to know all about accountability, know what it means to show up. I also have a father, a blue collar man that was military guy that worked in factories his whole life and worked his way up. And he had a good way of letting you know that no one cares. Like, no one cares more than you.
Yeah.
Like, your friends care, your coach cares, your spouse cares, your kids care, your community cares, and no one can care more than you. And if people do care more about you, your life, and your goals, something is wrong. So again, I was in that funk. In the back of my mind, I knew at some point I was going to get up. I also had a challenge. I'm curious for you, being the entrepreneur that you are as well, that my first job out of college, before I moved to New York City, I was a sales representative in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, responsible for like 25 Winn-Dixie grocery stores. And I didn't go to an office every single day. So I also had this challenge where my first job out of college, I didn't have to go to an office. And so I think that created an entrepreneur in me, that I don't like this whole sitting at a desk all day. You want me to show up for what? What if I just get the work done and don't come? Is that cool? So that was a challenge too. That's why I didn't immediately look for a job in Los Angeles either.
Yeah, that rings true to my heart for sure. I used to have people when I ran my company, I had 30 staff and they were all over the world. And people used to say, but if they're not if you don't have an office, how do you judge the quality of their work? And I'm like, by the quality of their work. Shocking, right? I mean, but there is this idea that if you can't see somebody working, they're not working, which, I mean, silver lining of COVID, hopefully we have this whole new idea that people can be productive if we don't actually see them literally physically in front of us grinding away. It's going to be okay. So, this idea that nobody's going to want it more than you, I think is an interesting one. And it's one where I got stuck a lot when I first started coaching people, when I first started even mentoring people. I could look at people and I could see their potential in pretty short order. Like I can look at somebody and have an idea of what they're capable of pretty quickly because, I'm a Jewish mother. And I also spent 20 years doing executive search. So I literally was paid to judge people, to size them up. As a success coach, as somebody who is called by other people to help them get better, do you see sometimes potential in people that they either don't see or don't believe, and because you see it, you want it sometimes more than they do? How do you get people to want their potential more than they're either ready to believe or ready to act upon?
It's a great question. And I mean, my short answer for me is I've released trying to force someone or wanting it more than they do. Those are the people that if I've worked with folks and after a few sessions, I can realize that they truly don't want it or at the time aren't willing to put the effort forward. Those are sometimes those engagements that come to an end. They don't always go to the full amount of sessions that have been contracted. To your point, my focus as a coach is very journalistic in base. I never have claimed to have all the answers, but one thing that I do have are the questions, I believe, and that comes from being a journalist. So what I think I'm able to do, probably the same way that you can, is as a journalist, as a coach, I can hear what's not being said in many ways. I'm not going to call myself an intuitive, but I can hear what's not being said in those coaching sessions. I'm able to connect some dots that people just can't see in front of them, that may be causing some blocks, that may be causing some friction, that may be identifying why they're continually having conflict with their manager, et cetera. And so what I do, of course, one thing I'm not going to do is tell them immediately. I'm going to ask great questions to get them to come to certain conclusions or things on their own. But I'm really great at asking questions, and I'm just a curious person as well. In my experience, I'm sure for other coaches listening right now and for you, most times people come to me and they say, here's the problem that I'm experiencing right now, primarily in my career or work. And they'll tell me something. But I've found that pretty much 10 times out of 10, what they tell me is the leaf on the tree.
Yes.
That's the leaf. I'm like, okay, by the time we get to our 10th session or if we continue to work over the course of a year or something like that, my job as a great coach is to ask great questions, to pull back from that leaf on the tree to the twig, to the branch, to the trunk. And if we really make some magic happen, get to the roots to see what they really want. The first indicator is the leaf, but with great questions, you can get to the roots, what they're really there for. But also something that I do, Laura, is, and this is really indicative of my book as well, like Stop Living on Autopilot. It's not one of those pat on the back kind of books. I love personal development books. I like self-help books, but also my approach with folks, it's real, it's raw, it's direct.
Yeah.
I am honest with people. If there's something that's not happening enough nowadays, is we are not being honest with our colleagues. We are not being honest with our friends. And it frustrates me because I know what it feels like not to say something, right? Those things that are unsaid, that leads to resentment, that leads to frustration, that leads to anger. We have this subject fires me up because we have people nowadays that they'll say things to us if something doesn't work out. They'll say things like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be. But I'm that dude, I'm that coach that says, was it not meant to be, or did you give up? Did you not put in the work?
Were you unwilling not watch your tape? Did you not get better?
Exactly. Were you unwilling to do the work when no one is watching? I know that firsthand. People will say things, if you don't pursue something, they say, oh, it's never too late. You know what? Yeah, it's never too late. And the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get. So anyone that's been coached by me, they say Antonio provides them with good friction. And, I'm from the snow in Michigan that right now. I'll get corny for a quick second. But like if you have a car and it's stuck in the snow and it's just spinning on ice or snow, you can put kitty litter or salt or sand underneath it to provide friction to propel you forward. Yeah. I think that's what a coach does. Now, as you know, you have to choose your moments when to apply that friction, and you have to have trust, because I'm not just going to come out and be super crazy, blunt, and direct with somebody I just met. I have to earn that trust, earn the permission, if you will, to do that. One last thing, I'm blabbing right now, but you just have my mind racing, Laura. When I was in grad school, this is going to make you laugh, especially as an author, as you're working on your second book. When I was in grad school, I had a Pulitzer Prize winning author as my master's advisor, which is
no pressure.
No pressure. I used to hate turning in drafts of my thesis to him because I knew it would come back covered in red ink with so much work to do. And he always would see my hesitation. And one day he said, "Why are you turning this in late? What's your hesitation?" I said, "My hesitation is you. It's going to come back covered in red ink." And Laura, he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Don't you know you pay for the red ink?" That's where the magic is, in the friction. If somebody wants to work with Laura, LGO, they want to work with Antonio, you're not probably paying for a pat on the back. You're here for a reason. You want to get some work done. You're paying for the red ink. You're looking for the good friction.
Yeah.
Right. So I even forgot what the initial question was, but you got me excited on that subject of people's potential.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to a statement that you said about how you love personal development and self-help. I have to say, when I wrote Limitless, I thought that I wrote a business book. And then they booked me. The book came out on April 2nd, but the Today Show called in January to book me. And they were like, "We're going to put you on the Hoda and Jenna Bush hour, which is the mostly stay-at-home mom hour." And I called my publicist and I was like, I wrote a business book. It's about careers. It's about your work. What am I going to talk about? And she's like, "It's the Today Show. Just go." So I went, and halfway through that, and literally sitting on the couch, halfway through the interview, I was like, "Oh, shit. I wrote a personal development book." And it took me a while to be okay with it, because most of the self-help world is terrible. Like, the self-help world is not created to cure you, to fix you. It's created to make you want more self-help. When the book came out in paperback, Jordan Harbinger gave me a quote for it, and it's one of my favorite blurbs of my book. It goes something like, in a sea of soul-sucking self-help garbage, Limitless is one of the first books that actually makes you feel better about yourself after you read it than before you started, right? Like,
wow.
that's self-help. So talk to me about personal development and what you like about it, because I have found that what I've learned now is that in the self-help world, I bring the help, but people really got to show up with the self. Like, that's a lot of hard work. And so I respect it, and I know it now, but you said that you love it. So I want to hear more about your experience in this space.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. I don't love all personal development books or self-help books. I like ones that get you to take action, ones that challenge you, ones that push you, ones that get you to move forward. Most of those books, to your point, are kind of the pats on the back. They'll say it's never too late, or maybe it wasn't meant to be. It's okay. Just love yourself and everything's going to be okay. And I'm not telling anyone not to love yourself. However, I find that a lot of those books, they just gloss over certain things. One thing they don't make people do, or they don't ask people to do, is to be willing to take accountability for their experience. I feel like a lot of books out there, and I'm not going to name any, are really good at keeping, quote, folks where they are with the status quo, with mediocrity, or pointing fingers externally, but never pointing the finger right here and asking the most profound question you can ever ask yourself, with wherever you are in your life, what you love or don't love. What role have I played in this? What role have I played in this marriage going bad and getting fired from this job, and the way my kids behave, and these consistent themes coming up over and over in my life? Because the only thing all of these things have in common is me. In that moment, when you're willing to be honest with yourself, that book or that course or that podcast that really makes you self-reflect and then take action, that's something else. I think the reason why your book probably folks really related to it in a personal sense is because it's not just theory. It's not just makes you feel good after you read it. It's asking you to take action. And a lot of these books I don't think are actionable. At the end of each of my chapters are the next steps. And these next steps are 4 profound questions for you to process, for you to actually do before you move on. And I tell people clearly, if you don't do this, you're not doing the quote unquote work.
Yeah.
Also with the personal health development books, I think sometimes our vantage point is so far out there, looking to the next 3 years, looking to the next 5 years. I really simplify this and say, hey, let's look at the next 30 days. What's right here in front of us right now, because I don't want to paralyze you, even though some of those exercises can be valuable. I don't want to paralyze you looking way there. I need you to look right here, what's going on right now, and help folks identify what their standards are, what their values are. Very rare in personal development books do I see a question that says, what do you stand for? Like, what are those non-negotiables for you? So I love the world. I love the work. I can't tell you how many personal development workshops that I've done over the years that I've learned so much from. And for me to write a book that's considered personal development, I feel good about it. And the feedback so far has been good, I think, because people like how raw and direct it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, it took me some time. I even wrote a blog post that was like, God, like, God help me. I wrote a self-help book, but the truth is I've loved the space and people who are in it, who are really doing the work, who are exploring. I mean, I've had conversations with people, like, I'm sure you get this too. Like, you send out a newsletter and you ask questions and people respond to you with incredibly personal stories about what they've been through and where they're going and their hopes and dreams. And what it makes me realize is that a lot of people don't really feel seen or heard. And so much of the self-help is that they've never really felt accepted for who they are and what they want to be. And so to have a coach say to them, like, tell me what you stand for. Okay, great. That's acceptable. Now, what are we going to do to get there? I think is a revelation for a lot of people.
100%. I think it's even better when the author, going back on the theme of these books, sometimes you would think that this author who wrote the book is living the perfect life. They have everything figured out. And one thing I think that people know about you and I is that I'm human. I'm so human. I mess up. Again, I have the questions. I don't have all the answers. People respond to my emails and they reach out to me nonstop because they're like, Antonio, I know what it's like to get fired like you did. Antonio, I know what it's like to develop a secret cigarette smoking habit, which I did 5 years ago. Antonio, I know what it's like to gain 30 pounds like you did when you're going through some challenging times in your life. So I think people, when they realize that you're human as well, it gives them permission, right? There's an exercise I do sometimes when I do workshops. And it's a powerful workshop with executive teams, large or small. And you've probably done something similar or have participated in it. But we go around the room and the question is, share something about you that would never show up on your Google search or on your LinkedIn profile. And people share these fascinating things about them, their background, that maybe they're a dancer. Somebody will share that they're pregnant. Maybe they volunteer each week, or they do a mission trip each year, or they have Shabbat every day, or every Friday at their home. And all of a sudden, when we go around the room, people find they have all these different things in common. They find out, I didn't know that about you. I'm very similar. And we create a connection all of a sudden. When we stop talking about what's on the resume, what's on the bio, et cetera, and we see that we are human.
So I would imagine that you probably have a suite of answers to that, some of which are on your website, like that you make the most delicious pancakes every Sunday morning. I want to know why and what's in them, by the way. So we'll get to that. But I would imagine that depending on the executive team or the audience with whom you do the exercise, you probably have a suite of answers that you give to either bring people together or to push them a little bit more out of their comfort zone or to relate more to them. What are some of the answers you give to that question?
That I give personally to that question?
Yeah.
Oh, some of the things you'll never know about me on a resume or show up on a bio. I like to let people know that I worked at a NASCAR racetrack in Michigan selling race programs. I think that was a huge one for me. Like, that was pretty interesting, showing up at those racetracks outside of Jackson, Michigan. I let people know that before I graduated from high school, I moved over 15 different times in my small hometown of Michigan. And between my mother and father are a total of 6 different divorces. And I know it's like to live in a shelter for battered, abused women and children. I sometimes will share about the move in New York City with $800 in my bank account. These days, something I share that a lot of people appreciate is, though today I can say I have a book published by a major publishing house, I like to remind people that before that book ever came out, I self-published 3 books over the past 10 years that actually led to that happening. They just think all of a sudden your book just shows up in Barnes and Noble out of the blue, but that was not the case for me. I share that my children, our twins, were born premature at 32 weeks. And one of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my life was having to go to the, I get emotional thinking about it, going to the NICU every day to see them weighing just, barely 3 pounds and this fight to live. And again, people have had kids way earlier than 32 weeks and twins tend to come earlier. Don't get me wrong, but that was challenging. Last thing I'll share, you got me going right now, Laura, sorry.
This is great.
Well, I appreciate you.
Podcast gold.
Well, I appreciate you even allowing the space for it to happen because it doesn't happen a lot in interviews and podcasts. I shared that my father has dementia and I haven't had a conversation with that guy in far too long. And he lives in a nursing home in Kentucky and I can't visit him now because of the pandemic. So I share things like that and people are like, wow, my grandmother, my father has dementia, or I know what it's like to come from an unstable background, or I know what it's like to be a first generation college student, figure out what it's like, how to figure things out on a college campus, etc. And they no longer see me as the speaker, the guy who speaks to thousands of people or is on TV. They just like, oh, that's not even Antonio. Oh, that's Tony. That's when it gets real. Like, that's not Antonio. That's Tony.
As you're telling all of those stories, it occurs to me that you grew up, there were a lot of dichotomies growing up. You had a strong father who, I would imagine was in a lot of ways a role model, sort of this larger than life person, right? Military, all the rest. But a lot of strife in the family of a situation that put her in a home. You were in these shelters. There was the college athleticism, being recognized as being extra good at something, going to college, being, on a team, NCAA, not a, thing that most people get to do, coming out of school, immediate stardom, Nickelodeon, all of that. And yet you're carrying inside of you this person who has seen some pretty rough stuff. Is there that person who's inside of you that worries that you're going to end up back in a situation like that and continues to want to strive and keep going and collect more trophies? Or have you sort of made peace with where you are right now? Being a father of premature twins, is it sort of, I think that's probably a pretty humbling experience and sort of forces you in the present, but where does all of that sit inside of you as you think about how you wanted this book to do and what it would be like to have this book out in the world? Yeah.
Well, today, I don't have those fears about, going back and all those types of things due to years of therapy, years of working with a coach myself. By the way, I'm always blown away how many coaches don't have their own coach, which always blows me away. Like, well, you're a coach, but you don't have a coach? Another subject. So these days, no, those fears aren't on me. However, during those Nickelodeon days, during my TV days, et cetera, 100%, there were fears to going back. I was the one that got away. I have an older brother, older sister, folks that are still back in Michigan. Folks are doing okay, healthy, fine. But I was one that got away, that got the opportunity to get the education, and I didn't want to waste it. If there's anything that was always on my mind, and this may still show up every now and then, is a little bit of guilt for being successful, for the experiences that I'm able to have with my family, with my kids, the things I can provide them with that I was unable to experience. So guilt showed up a lot. One is for me now, I can see it very clearly, but one of the main reasons why I went into television, Laura, is because I wanted validation. I wanted people to say, I pick you. That's why I went into TV, because I was a kid that, for a long time, for a long part of my upbringing, I had to figure out things on my own. And that made me extremely resourceful. I was the kid, instead of going the wrong way, I became resourceful. I was a year-round athlete. I found places to be. I had things on my calendar. I knew when to show up at so-and-so's house because that's when dinner was going to be served. I figured out how to get free lunch. It's different things, right? But going to college,
you were an entrepreneur even then.
100%. But I went to TV for all the wrong reasons, and that was validation. And that's why I left after 12 years. I realized, though I had a great career in this television industry, I kind of got into it for the wrong reasons. I want to do something else. Makes me think about, the blue check mark on social media that people always talk about, whether Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And one day a kid years ago asked me how he could get the blue check mark. And I said, well, why do you need it? And he's like, well, I just want to show that it's me. And I'm like, well, there's no other you, but why do you really want it? And he said, to show that I'm important.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, no blue check mark can verify you and show you that you are important. You are important since the day you were born.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a lesson that I have to remind myself, but also whenever I find myself, feeling a little insecure or something like that, I was verified the day that I was born. So these days I feel strong. I feel rooted in who I am as a man. The book really jumped off after I kind of went through a crisis 5 years ago where I felt like my manual to life ran out. Like my parents were divorced. So I was 1 year into marriage. I'm like, what does it mean to be a husband? I didn't see that growing up. Right. We're in a stable house. I didn't see that growing up. We have kids. What does it mean to be a father? Because my father wasn't around the vast majority of my life. So that kind of led to my crisis, that my manual came to an end and I had to figure out things from there. And that's the journey a little bit to maybe not figuring things out, but making some new decisions to get me to good places.
What you didn't realize in that moment is that everybody's manual runs out the minute somebody hands you your child. And you're like, what do I do with this stranger? And you're like, what do I do with these two strangers who were premature? It's like even harder.
Exactly. It's so challenging. But I also realized that I wasn't the only one who had to remind myself that whatever I'm experiencing, I'm not the only one who has experienced this. I mean, you know about this very well, I'm sure, with the folks that are attracted to you and your work. There are a lot of people out there who are quote unquote successful on paper, on the internet, but they are stuck. They are lost. They are unhappy. They are unfulfilled. You write about this very clearly. And I do the same in my book. And I'd reached that point. And so I attract that man or woman who's in that place of being successful, but stuck, maybe feeling a little bit lost and trying to figure out what the next decisions are for their life and even career sometimes.
So how did you get clear on exactly what you wanted in life? What kind of father you want to be? What kind of a husband you wanted to be? What kind of career you wanted to have? When your manual ran out, how did you write your own manual?
Yeah, well, once again, I didn't do it alone. No one who's accomplished anything of significance did it alone. So I had my team of therapists, my team of my community. I had my coach that I worked with. But one thing I had to do was recommit to my life. We talk a lot about commitment in this life. Something we don't talk enough about is how every single day you have to recommit to what's most important. So I had to identify what my standards and values are, regardless if I'm having a good day or a bad day, how I'm going to show up from a career perspective, from a husband perspective, from a father perspective, health, fitness perspective, etc. Something that I needed to do, and this is just personal for me, is that I realized I needed to be bold and courageous again. In many ways, atrophy was setting in on who I was. That person who had moved to New York City with about $800 in his bank account with dreams of breaking into the television industry, no part of that person existed anymore. He was going through the motions. He was on cruise control. And the scary thing, Laura, as you know, is that sometimes our cruise control is pretty good. It gets you good results. You can still be successful. But on a regular basis, I felt this kind of tap on the shoulder saying, this is good, but this is not what you're supposed to be doing. So I had to find ways to be bold and courageous again. And a question I'd ask myself that I like to ask people is a great coaching question as well, is if your life was a movie, what would the lead character start doing to turn things around? And I think what a powerful question, because we can answer that question as it relates to our career, as it relates to our relationships, as it relates to parenting, fitness, personal finances, etc. And that's just one decision every single day that we can make. So I asked myself that question and started making new decisions, not too many decisions, but a few new decisions in all of those categories. I can get more practical on some of the tips and things I did if you like, but those are some over, well, the more practical tips, like, let me give you an example. Like, I know if I want to have a good day, 5 things must happen. This is a great example. 5 things must happen. Not a great day, but I've determined through analysis that if these 5 things didn't happen, I'll have a good day. 1, if I meditate. If I meditate at my ongoing meditation practice, odds are it's going to be a good day, and it won't be around 11 a.m. and I'm like, something's off. I'm like, oh, you didn't meditate today. If I sweat every day, odds are it's going to be a good day. If I educate myself every single day, odds are it's going to be a good day. When I say educate, that could be listening to a podcast like this. It could be reading 10 pages of a book, taking a course, etc. If I eat well every single day, I know it's probably going to be a good day. I've never once said in my life, you know what? I wish I ate bad yesterday. I've never said that before in my life. And last but not least, if I connect with someone, I know it's going to be a good day. And when I say connect, I'm not talking about text messages or instant messages. I mean hearing someone's voice, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. On my planner, I have a box next to educate, meditate, connect, sweat, and eat. And when I go back, and if I'm having an off day, I just have to go back and look, say, oh, guess what? 3 of those things didn't happen today. So for me, most people can listen to that right now and identify probably 3 things that if they do every single day, it's going to work in their favor to it being a good day.
When the pandemic first started, I did what everybody else did, which was like, put on a pair of pajamas and ate a bunch of comfort food and didn't leave my couch for a few weeks and sort of just watched over the burning embers of my speaking career, which,
yes.
No planes, no events, no stages. What's a speaker to do? There, the pajamas and the s'mores look pretty good. So, and then I had that moment where I was like, all right, Gassner, like, what's wrong with you? Like, get up, let's keep moving. There are things that we can do. And I didn't ask myself the question of what would the lead character in the movie do, but I was like, okay, in a year, when you look back on this, what do you want to have said you've done, right? It was sort of the same thing. I think it's the same idea. You have to take it out of your person. So it's not like, what am I going to do? What should I do? But it's like, what will have happened, right? You kind of got to make it a little distant. Like, what would she do? What would he do? When you make it a little distant. And I came to the realization that there are sort of 4 pillars of health. There's hydration, nutrition, movement, and rest. And I was like, all right, if I have 4 Nalgenes of water, great. If I, follow, my macro plan, great. If I do 60 minutes of movement, whatever it is, great. If I sleep 8 hours a night, great. But here's what I did. I didn't give myself a point for 8 hours of sleep or 0 points for not 8 hours of sleep. I said, okay, I slept 6 hours. I'm going to give myself 3/4 of a point, right? So at the end of the day, I was like, if I have, 3 points in total across the board, that's a good day. I'm like, I decided to just lower the bar as much as I possibly could. And I'm like, all right, at the end of the day, what worked, what didn't work? So it was like, I had those 4 columns, and then I had a column, which is like, what worked well today? What am I going to work on tomorrow? Right. So it was like, all right, I didn't eat well. Why didn't I eat well? Because I was stressed and busy in the middle of these like 14 Zoom meetings, and I didn't have a chance to eat a healthy lunch. So I grabbed a bag of potato chips. Okay, tonight I'm going to prep some food for lunch tomorrow. Right. And just being able to say, these are the things, whether it's your 5 or my 4, or someone else's 3 or somebody else's 7, just being able to say, these are the things that make me feel like the fullest version of myself. And then just being intentional about it. And I think that's really so much of what you talk about in your book, Stop Living on Autopilot, is just to think about that question of what's going to feel good for you. And then, right, like you say, get clear, right? Get clear on exactly what you want, and then be bold, like go ahead and do it.
Absolutely.
I love that.
I love the metrics that you created for yourself. I think when you can check something off, and I love the pointing skill that you had, the metrics are critical. Most people are waking up and just going with the flow. It's an ad hoc kind of day. And guess what? When you go with the flow, as we all know, you can end up absolutely anywhere, somewhere you don't want to be. I always say winging it is easy when you're well prepared. But something really, really stood out when you were talking. And what stood out for me, and I know this is your podcast, not mine, but you said, all right, Gassner.
Yeah.
Most of us need to activate that person. We've let that person disappear from our life. And for me, that's all. Come on, T-Neves. My voice is, come on, T-Neves. That's my nickname. All my college buddies call me T-Neves.
Let's go.
You said, all right, Gassner. That's that voice that activates, like, all right, you know what to do. Let's move forward on this. So right now, that person listening, they I don't know what your name is for yourself, how you talk to yourself, but you have that voice that has high expectations for you, that voice that knows your potential, that voice that loves you, that voice that wants to encourage you. And what happens is this: the more we distract ourselves with things that we shouldn't be distracting ourselves with, emotional eating, having that just a glass of wine in the evening, and I love wine, don't get me wrong, just a glass of wine in the evening will take away, all right, Gassner, it'll take away, come on, Neves, right? All emotional eating, Netflix binges, etc. That helps sedate and gets rid of that voice. So I invite you and I challenge people to not to sedate, so you can hear that voice, that tap on your shoulder, and then do something about it.
Yeah, because I mean, when I say Gassner to myself, when you say Neves to you, that's shorthand for get your shit together. You're better than this, right? Like it's shorthand for a lot of stuff. It's shorthand for, you've already shown yourself you can do better than this. Why are you doing, the right things to do? Why are you slipping away? Look how well you're going to feel when you do these things. It's just like, come on, let's go. Like, let's keep going. And I have found myself 35 sections into the 35 section Harvard Stadium. I found myself at mile 20 of a marathon. I found myself at 1,500 meters of a 2,000 meter rowing race. Like I will literally say like, come on, Gassner, let's go. And the other women in the boat are like, what? Like, you're not supposed to talk in the boat unless you're the coxswain. And I'm just like, so like, I just need to say it to sometimes I just have to like call it forth and just bring that person up, because I think it is what happens, right? When we are on autopilot, and we end up in the right place, we think it's because we got there on purpose, but sometimes we just get lucky. And, it's hard to groove the pattern of luck. Like you're not going to get there again tomorrow and the next day and the next day just because you happen to get there. Like it has to be intentional, and you have to go back and practice not just the stuff you messed up, but the stuff you did well also, so that it actually happens on purpose, right? You can't live your life on autopilot and expect to get to where you want to get to if where you want to go is a far distance, right? Because if you're like 1 degree off and you're only going 10 feet away, it doesn't make a difference. But if, over the course of 80, 90, 100 years of a life, 1 degree off puts you in a different country.
Yeah. And your point is life is asking all of us just to make a decision. I said it earlier, but not making a decision is making a decision. And I'll make it easy for people. What's one decision you can make today to improve your life? How simple is that? What's one decision that you can make today to improve your life? And if you're struggling, even if that question paralyzes you, which I know it paralyzes some people, you can break it into categories. What decision can I make in my career, personal finances, diet, relationship, etc.? And a great coaching question I love to ask my clients whenever they're stuck is, if someone was in your exact same shoes, what would you advise them to do? Right? Because again, you can separate yourself from it. And when you look at yourself differently, like what would you advise someone in your position to do if they're trying to figure out which job to take, A or B? All of a sudden they're like, oh, if someone was in that position, I would tell them to do X or Y.
And it's so obvious for them.
So remove yourself from the equation and you might be surprised.
Well, and I also love that you don't say like, don't tell me about 10 years or 5 years or 1 year. It's just 30 days. Because what's the one thing you can do to make your life better in the next 30 days? You can take the stairs and not the elevator. You can go to bed a little bit earlier. Maybe you only have that wine on Friday nights, right? I mean, so many people have wine or have alcohol on Sunday because they're like, oh, they got the Sunday scaries and they're, stressed out about Monday. But you know what happens? Then you just totally screw up Monday. Like, I'm like, fine, if you want to have the alcohol, have it on Friday night and then be hungover on Saturday. But you can just change when you do it. But if you take it from 10 years or 5 years or even a year to those 30 days that you're talking about, how do you become more intentional about just one thing in the next 30 days? Then you groove that pattern of becoming intentional about that thing, which then gives you the confidence because you've shown that you have competence in changing. And then all of a sudden you can do more and do more and do more. So I'm doing these interviews as research for my next book, which is going to be called Wonder Hell. And Wonder Hell is all about this moment when, oh my God, I did this thing. It succeeded. I can't believe it. I was on TV. I put out this best-selling book, whatever the thing is, right? I've got this great coaching practice speaking. And you realize that you actually can do more than you ever thought possible. In these moments, you see this glimpse of who Neves can really be. And you're like, oh, I actually want that now. I want that next. But it's also hell because you're exhausted and you're stressed and full of anxiety. And I don't know if I can do it. And I don't know, is it for me? What do I have to do? How do I get there? So it's wonderful and it's hell all at the same time. It's wonder hell. But I think wonder hell are those moments where the burden of your potential walks in to your psyche and goes, hey, T, What you got for me? Are you going
Mm.
to live into this newfound you that you didn't even know yesterday existed? Or are you going to let it pass you by? So I'm interested in these moments where you've had these transitions, when you've had to look at yourself in the mirror and cut off the dreadlocks, or get the call from the Today Show and not be producing it, but being the guest talking about this great new book. Are there moments where you've said, oh, there's more? And how do you coach yourself in those moments?
Yeah, first, I love the idea of Wonder Hell. That's brilliant. And the book is going to be brilliant. Those moments can be extremely scary because most people, when they experience more success than they ever had, or sometimes experience more, making more money, experience more happiness in their life, unfortunately, what they end up doing is falling back. I know Gay Hendricks writes about this in his book, The Big Leap. And he talks about the upper limit problem and how essentially we're all born with a certain temperature that we exist at based on our upbringing, experiences, et cetera. And then when we exceed that, if our natural temperature is 72, then all of a sudden things go great for us and we get to 80. What we do is we sabotage and mess up to do things to bring us back to our normal 72. What we have to do is find those things that allow us to continue to exist as we move forward beyond our limits. And most of those things are community, putting the work forward, having standards, etc. For me, I like to think about the Today Show that I was just on, for example. For me, it was a really wild moment because when I left TV behind in 2012, I was working for NBC as a correspondent in New York City, as a business correspondent. These days, when I get calls like the Today Show, I used to be really fearful, like, oh no, this is my moment. Am I going to mess up? But these days I get excited, right? Even as a speaker now, and I go, and people are like, aren't you nervous when you go on stages in front of 5,000 people? And I'm like, no,
I love
I'm
it.
excited.
Yeah.
I love what Fritz Perl said. Fear is excitement without the breath. Fear is excitement without the breath. But here's the thing. I'm only excited if I'm prepared. If I've done the work. The only time I'm like fearful or like, oh no, or I wake up like with a weird feeling in my stomach is when I know I haven't prepared. People think Laura gets on a stage and delivers a killer keynote and that's the first time she did it. Or if she hasn't practiced and outline that thing like crazy. Like I haven't been in my garage or I haven't been to smaller events like crazy before I speak to 5,000 people. Before I went on the Today Show yesterday, people have no idea that I had my talking points and I was prepping like crazy and I knew what to do and I was ready to pivot, etc. Like nothing was going to catch me off guard. People also didn't know before I got on the Today Show yesterday, I had done Today in Nashville and Good Day Seattle and all these other ones all across the country, getting ready for that, building into that moment. So for that person who sees that potential, who is so happy, but also like, oh hell, as you just mentioned, that is the time for you to recommit to what's most important. That is the opportunity for you to lean in. It's going to be uncomfortable, but as we all know, that's where the magic happens, in the uncomfortableness. And that's why it's so critical, as we mentioned earlier, to make sure you're not doing it alone. Don't isolate, because when you have good people, when you have allies around you that I write about in the book, those are the people who are going to encourage you. Those are the people who are going to remind you that you are Gassner. You're Team Neves. This is what you're built for. This is what you are built for. So we need those people. And to be clear, those people don't always have to be our best friends and our family members. That could be your coach.
They're often not, actually. They're often not. Usually the family's like, are you sure? Are you going to get hurt? I'm not so sure. Yeah.
It can be your coach. Maybe you're in a group coaching program. So people you're in a great Facebook group, people you've met via a podcast group that you listen to, etc. But don't do it alone in isolation. And we know, like I know if I've done the work or not, like if I've prepared enough. And I think we all know that as well. So I'm excited for folks to lean into that, to get super, super uncomfortable and to stretch themselves, because why not? First, why not you, right? Why not me? But here's the biggest thing. I'm going to say some really simple words for that person that's listening right now. And I have to remind myself of this every single day. And that is, you have a say in this. You have a say in your life. This is not acting by default.
Yes.
You have a say in this. Never forget that.
Oh man, I'm so fired up. This is fantastic. People ask me all the time, like, aren't you scared to speak on stage? And I'm like, no, speaking on stage is easy. What's hard is being quiet on stage, making a point, and then sauntering over to the other side of the stage, landing the next line, looking over left, looking over right, making a little callback joke, sauntering back over to the middle, and carrying on with the next stage. So hard to just wait and be silent and let the audience get it. Like speaking on stage, not hard. Being silent on stage, that's the terrifying stuff. Like that's when you have no idea what's going to happen. And here's the big thing that I never realized, that speaking to 5,000 people, the energy that is carried through the silence of 5,000 people is so much easier to handle than the energy that's carried through the audience of 25 people.
Oh, give me 5,000 people over 25 people any day. Those 25 people can see you. They can really see you.
Yeah, they can really see you. And it's I am a raging introvert. I love speaking to 5,000, 10,000 people. You put me in a party of 10 and I'm like in the corner twitching. I mean, it's not going to work. But I love that because that's that space of the silence, the discomfort that you feel when you can literally hear the breathing of every single person in that room. And you're like, why is that person on their phone? Where's that guy going? Did I bore him or just have to pee? Why is that person talking to their neighbor? What, the whole time when you're walking across the stage, you have the voice in the back of your head. But that's where the magic happens, because that's where you let yourself get uncomfortable, and then you let yourself deliver right there. So I love that. I've written like a billion notes while we've been talking about self-sabotage, about the preparation, about recommitting to what's most important to you, about the magic happening in the discomfort. I love that. That is all. You can't get uncomfortable unintentionally, right? Mm-hmm. Like you certainly can't stay uncomfortable unintentionally. And I think being comfortable, being uncomfortable is, that's a pretty tough intention to set every day, but one that really changes your life.
100%. And funny enough, speaking about silence, an assignment I love to give my clients that is so hard for them to do. You're going to laugh at this. I'm like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go for a 30-minute walk with no podcast or music in your ear, no texting on your phone, no nothing, no one's next to you. I just want you to walk in silence. I don't care where you do it, for 30 minutes. And people, initially, they say the first 5-10 minutes are so hard because they want to listen to something. They want to distract themselves with something. But 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, they say after those 30 minutes, either A, they've had some type of breakthrough. 2, maybe they started crying because they had something that was pinned up emotionally that they finally got to let out. Mm-hmm. They had some fun ideas. They felt relieved. It's like they exhaled for the very first time. But very rarely in our life do we give ourselves permission to have that silence. And we desperately need it because the vast majority of our day is filled with something. Let me tell you something. Go for a 30-minute walk. And don't listen to anything. Don't even bring your phone with you. And it's going to be the most uncomfortable 30 minutes. But I guarantee you something awesome is going to come from it.
Well, that is a perfect place to end this podcast, because anybody who is listening, who is on a walk, who is on a run, who is on their treadmill, who is on their bike, who is doing this for a distraction, we're now leaving you and you're going to have to finish in silence. That is your assignment. Don't start up another one. Just be in silence. Antonio, tell the fine people where, I could talk to you all day, but tell the fine people where they can find you.
Yeah, everything for Antonio can be found at theantonioneves.com. The handles on social media are also theantonioneves.com. Super easy to find. Look forward to hearing from folks.
And your book, Stop Living on Autopilot?
Yeah, Stop Living on Autopilot can also be found on stoplivingonautopilot.com or theantonioneves.com. Book's doing fantastic, and I hope folks get to check it out.
It is doing fantastic. Well, congratulations. It is fantastic. I love it. Lots of great people have had lots of great things to say about it. And I love the energy and the joy and the fun and the optimism of it.
Thank you for
being
me.
here with us.
Thank you.